Greetings. I'm Connie Graney, and this is my presentation. So let's get started. I will introduce myself first. I actually am a substitute teacher, and I have also had a regular classroom. I started my life as an art teacher, substituting the first 3 weeks after college. And then I started substituting after my retirement from the classroom. And has been for about 15 years. Anyway, I've got some tips to share with you and also some considerations for you to have along the way. So I thought I'd write down a few things and I'll just flash those up to you in just a minute. But basically, it is important to have an art class that is a first class art class. And I've observed a variety of different classrooms, not just art, but many other substitute situations as well. The last school that I taught in for 15 years, I taught ceramics, drawing, and painting. That was a situation where we did not hire substitute teachers unless we were going to be gone for at least 2 weeks. So at in-service at the beginning of the year, we worked together with different departments to create substitute situations that I or any of the other teachers could walk into another person's classroom and carry on. And that was really a good experience because I learned something about how art connects with all different subject areas. And I've been able to substitute in all different subject areas as well. So the first thing I noticed when entering someone else's classroom when I substitute is the organization of their room and the skills that they already had established among the students to make sure that things would run smoothly. That's what I want to emphasize today. And so in talking with some of those teachers and discussing and observing, I realized that there are several things that are needed to make a really good substitute situation, whether it's an art sub or some other person just coming in the room or even a visitor coming in, that the students can respond in a certain way that shows the relevance to what they're doing in the classroom. And then most of the time projects can just continue as is. So the most important thing is relevance and building community. So if you have a strategic plan and a strategic purpose, the rest falls into place. So I'm going to talk about a couple different things to maybe help you out. And hopefully those tips will be fun too. So the one thing that is important is that your environment is organized. Now this is my studio and my gallery. My workspace is actually on the lower level. And you can see I've got things arranged that are visually interesting and artwork that I've created as well. So you need to have that same situation in your classroom, and I'm sure most of you do. Beginning teachers need to know that. I'm not sure I did when I started. The other thing with organization is the room needs to be safe, feel safe. And the way that starts is being able to find things. And some of the classrooms I've substituted in for art, they had little caddies where they had everything organized and sorted according to the needs of the time and the day and for each table. So that might be something you have. Or maybe you have individual packets, maybe a bucket of something that all students have their own bucket that they take care of. Or maybe you've decided to use an old dishwasher silverware thing for your caddy to carry the things in that would be needed almost all the time in the classroom, maybe numbered, maybe labeled, maybe color coded, something like that. I've observed that. And also to make the environment safe, students need to feel that safety with you as well. And I know growing up, I was a fairly quiet child and I was not very talkative. And so art became my source, my strength, in other words, to communicate with people. And I usually wear this hat during conferences, and I thought I would start off with it, but I'm going to take it off here in just a second. But my hat has buttons from all different kinds of places, including one that says from a national conference, Art Saves Lives. And I think this is really important. I would say art saved my life, and I've observed many classrooms, art classrooms in particular, where students come and hover during before school, maybe after school, or during their lunchtime or whatever, because they feel that place, the art room, is a safe place. So a few ways to establish that might be to have very good expectations. And if you realize that the things you do in the art room actually are teaching life skills, including cleanup. So you set it up with organization, you explain your expectations, like who does what, when, and how do they do it, and why do they do it. So all of those different things, who has the responsibilities, when do you clean up, and so on. That kind of goes along with not only being responsible and respectful, but what are your classroom rules? And I know from other videos and other workshops that I've been to that having students, when they're old enough, participate in deciding the rules. Usually I had the 3 R's: respect, responsibility, and risk taking. Another thing that helps is to ask questions. So when I enter a classroom, whether it's as an artist in residence or as a substitute teacher, I like to ask questions, and I like to listen and see who wants to answer first and what kinds of things that I can listen to and respond back to and remember later. That is really important. And the next thing that kind of goes along with that is knowing their names, building relationships through verbal communication, silent communication, or whatever, but that each student knows that you know who they are is really important. And I know for elementary teachers, when you have 600 kids, maybe a day, I guess, or I don't know, however many it is, sometimes it seems like 600 kids a day, there has to be something to connect you together to have that relationship. So I find that seating charts, when I'm substituting with pictures, really help me for each class. I take a quick look through, and then the other thing I do is I have students write down their names on the top of their paper on the front side, so that I can see who they are and what they're doing, and I can make a comment and say their name. And sometimes they're really surprised that I know their name, but I read it on the paper. They just don't know that or realize it anyway. So the other thing you can do is have special storage areas or folders. And sometimes when they get the folders out, it has their name on it. Maybe you have a table folder with all of their names on it, so that those students learn each other's names by that folder. You can also do what I'm planning on doing in person with the students who are actually going to be my peers and teachers. I am going to do a clay project, hopefully, with them, hands-on. So the other thing that goes along with knowing kids' names and knowing the table arrangement, who can sit well and work well together, is to be aware of needs of people and actually train the students, if they see someone who needs help, especially during cleanup time, that they voluntarily help each other. That's really important too, and it also establishes sort of a safety net. I'll tell you a quick story. One time I was substituting. I always bring my sketchbook so they know I'm a working artist, and they usually pay a little more attention to me. So I will sketch a few students when they're working quietly, and I usually say at the beginning something about, I am an artist, I brought my sketchbook, I can show you some pictures in it, but I like to sketch students when they're working, and if the whole class is working quietly, I will draw someone. And this would be some examples. So I'm going to hold that up so you can kind of see them. The other thing I do is sometimes I use this as a disciplinary measure as a substitute, because after I draw their picture, maybe I'll say, who is this? Is that Matt, or is it Ned, or who is it? And someone will always tell me who it is, and then I might go over to Matthew or Ned and say, hey, I drew your picture. Should I show it to the principal? And sometimes they'll like back off and they'll get really quiet. Okay, so that's one possibility. working as an artist, I'll talk about again in a little bit. The other thing is making sure your room is not only calm, but also exciting. There has to be something going on, maybe some little thing that you change every day or that kids can look for or look forward to. I mean, it could even be how you dress or how you do your hair or maybe a certain kind of logo or sign you put up on your desk, but everything still needs to be relatively organized and safe. Everything would have a place. Okay, I'm gonna hold that up real quick as a review. So you're trying to build the first essential community in your art room. Have some strategic plan and purpose. Create the environment and expectations. Make sure you have some specific rules and guidelines that they understand. Ask questions, respond and share ideas. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Make sure that you know their names. And I'm just doing this short board like this for a couple of reasons. One is I'm having a little technical difficulty with some of my things on the computer, and so this is actually helping me quite a bit. So we, all of us teachers together in this, we are the role models, and we are the ones who lead the community, and we need to do it together. I'm not the authority. However, I do have some knowledge because of my experience, and so do all of you too. So whatever knowledge you have that you think is important, that's what you need to share. And I really believe that art teaches all kinds of life skills. And helping with cleanup and helping each other, being kind to each other is really important. And sometimes we have to learn with the class. Sometimes I've gone to a workshop and experienced something, and it is such a cool thing. And I haven't done it before with the class, so sometimes I tell the class, I went to the workshop, I found out this really neat thing, I want to try it with you. I've never done this before, not with any other class, so you're the first, and let's talk about it, and you can help me out as we think together as artists. Now, thinking as an artist is really important. And no matter what class I go into, I make sure that they understand that an artist goes through problem solving. There's a problem, they state what the problem is, then they end up thinking about all possibilities, hundreds sometimes possibilities of how we could solve this problem. Then we choose one, we take that problem, we plan out how we're going to do it, and then we would go ahead and solve the problem in some way. And maybe it will work out and maybe it won't. And if it doesn't work out, we've made a mistake or something happens to spoil it, that is another teaching situation. Anyway, what happens when we kind of do all these different things in our classroom is when someone comes into our classroom, if our classroom, every student knows what they're supposed to do and when and why in particular, like what the plan is, what the meaning is, why it's relevant. If they know that, when a visitor comes in, like a substitute or a principal or something like this, things can happen that are really cool because you are teaching them how to teach. I'll give you an example. One time, a principal came into my art room. He knew nothing about clay, and clay is my specialty. And I had to be gone for a while, a short period of time. And the principal didn't know nothing about art, but there was no sub. No sub would come to take the art class. So he ended up having to step in. So what I thought would be sort of cool then, this was all pre-planned, not that I would be gone, but that all the kids knew what to do. So when he came in, they started asking him in the clay class, do you know what wedging is? Do you know what air dried clay is? Do you know who, and they named some potters that we had just studied. And he didn't know any of it. And so they ended up teaching him, and he started understanding what was going on in the classroom. It wasn't just a fun time, which sometimes that's what administrators might think. So kids even talked about what they were thinking about, why they were doing certain things, and the problem solving, and it was really cool. He also went into another class, a drawing and painting class, and some of the students were working on a watercolor theme, and they were using different color schemes. So they started asking him if he knew what analogous was, what split complementary was, and of course he didn't know. They taught him. So when he left the room, even though he probably didn't think anything about art being so important, I think he actually realized the importance at that point of what the kids were learning. It wasn't just going in there and having fun, even though they might have fun. So that is the whole purpose of this talk, actually, is to help you think about what you do in your classroom to set up sort of an organization and a community to make things happen, so that if you can't be there for, say, an hour or 15 minutes or whatever, whoever comes in, that class will run smoothly because kids know where things are, they know what to do. There's leaders in the group that have been trained to accept responsibility and so on. And even if I'm subbing, sometimes I'll look around the room and talk to the kids as they enter. And usually you can tell kids who are friendly, who are aggressive, who are assertive, who might have some hyperactivity or some other issues. And so you ask the kids even, who's the leader in this class, or who's the best artist, or who's the one who knows what's going on. Because sometimes the person I'm subbing for didn't have time to write anything down. So in that situation, those kids will let me know who I can depend on. And that's really cool. And sometimes I pick the kids who are probably going to misbehave, and I ask them, can you help me out here? Will you be responsible? And so on. And that is a really important concept and experience to have, that you can figure out who to ask and make them responsible. The other part of this is, think of yourself as an artist. I heard so many people this summer at one of my retreats say something to the effect that I never have time to do my art when I'm working at school. And I feel like being an artist and doing work as an example is so important. Not that we're training artists, but we're training kids how to think and how to be leaders and how to be responders and how to be creative thinkers. So if I'm working on a project, and again, if something happens that it didn't turn out right or whatever, I might tell the kids, I just was working on this painting and all of a sudden my water dumped over last hour and spilled all over. And so now I have to figure out, what can I do to make that right once it dries? How can I change it? What can be the best? And it's not throwing things away. That's not an option. We always try to solve the problem in some other way, which again is thinking like an artist. What can I do to remedy the situation? Because in life, there are so many things that happen that are not with our plan, accidents and so on. What can we do to make the best of it? How can we be the best person we can be in that negative situation? So think about that, because you really are teaching and encouraging in some particular way. So what I'd like you to also think about going along with that is, daily you are inviting students into your classroom. You are inviting them into the learning experience. You are encouraging them. And so I always think asking questions is probably the best and most relevant way that you can do something. So some of the questions you might ask, or do you know about such and such? Or have you ever done such and such? Or is there anyone who has traveled or knows about this artist? Have you heard of this? Have you seen something on TV? Or maybe you watched a video about throwing on the wheel or whatever it might be. Ask questions and allow responses. And believe me, almost every group will answer the questions. Not everyone will answer, but there'll always be some. And if you have the same class for several days in a row, pay attention to their eyes and their body movements, because they might know the answer, but they might not raise their hand, and you can call them and say, did you have something to add to this? And then that shows that you're interested in them. And if you can call them by name, that's really important too. So dealing with accidents, we started talking about a little bit ago. So if something happens that is a mistake or whatever, how do you respond to that? And when I was in college, I had an awesome professor, pottery professor, whose pots were all lined up getting ready to be fired. They were air dry. And all of a sudden, another person came in the room and accidentally bumped them, and the domino broke. And I was the one who ended up having to clean it up. And I watched how calm he was, and the instructor. And he basically told me, you can't demean people ever. Even if you're angry inside, you have to kind of cover that up and act maybe that even though it's not okay, you're still going to be kind and calm and maybe positive in the case of, absolute chaos or something horrific. That's really important. That involves self-discipline as well as self-knowledge. So think about, how do you deal with those accidents, problems, and challenges? Because you are the role model, and you want your kids to respond in a calm, whatever manner, whether it's a tornado or whatever it is. You are the teacher, and you help them along the way, especially if they've been working on a project for a long time. They think it's really good, and someone else comes along and accidentally or intentionally destroys it. So I'm going to show you a young child's painting and a couple of things about it. This was one of their early attempts at painting and mixing color. So I'll just show you that real quick. So questions to ask is, what did you learn? How did you feel? What did you think as you were working on this? And the what did you learn? I mean, you can probably tell there's a lot of things going on here with the washes, the running together, the water, and so on. So the act of reflection after something helps the kids to realize what they learned. Even if they don't say it, if they can think about it, that will really help. One of the things that I learned quite a few years ago was I worked with a group in Iowa called New Art Basics. It's not in vogue anymore. I worked on that with that group from the 80s, early 80s until about 2005. Anyway, this is one of the things that you might be interested in. When I was teaching, I learned to think about visual thinking, visual logic, cultural issues, historical issues, personal issues, spiritual issues, and also trying to do metaphoric thinking, which basically metaphoric thinking is things like Matisse, Salvador Dali, Rene Magritte, Escher. Students really like that work, but they can't really create until they know a few things ahead of that, maybe some technical skills or whatever. So sometimes you have to teach the skills and tell them, I'm teaching you these skills, but I want you to use the skills and the techniques, but I don't want your work to look exactly like mine. I want it to be original. And sometimes when I go into substitute, instead of having something that has meaning and purpose, sometimes the art teachers have these coloring sheets stacked up. And I feel like I have a wealth of knowledge, and maybe they didn't know I was the one coming in, but I say to the kids, okay, I introduce myself, and I also tell them at the very beginning, I'm a cleanup person. If we do such and such, when we get ready to clean up at the end of class, every single table needs to be cleaned up. The floor, everything's cleaned up before anyone leaves, and there's no passes. And when I used to teach, I had that written in my sub notes as well. If the kids don't clean up, I will expect you to do it before you leave. So please make the kids clean up. They're used to it. Thank you. That kind of thing. So hopefully that's sort of helpful. So basically you have a mission. Your mission is to do the strategic planning and create an environment where your students can know what to do when, where things are, how things are done, especially cleanup, And then you're teaching to teach so that they can teach other people, their parents, their classmates, the principal, visitors to the classroom, or even a substitute. Because when I've been in a math room before, I've actually had students say, do you know how to do this problem? Or do you know about this? It's cool. I have lots of stories to tell about substituting, but we'll pass it on. So you had your mission, and if you set it up right, within a few weeks, there will be no sub for art. No problem. Okay. Feel free to contact me with email or questions or anything like that. Talk to you soon. Bye.